rather than me just talking. So I will share my screen because I did prepare a little something to share with you guys. Let me go slideshow. So I'm obsessed with the power of walking. I have always walked as part of my personal practice, even before I realized that it was a personal practice. And I remember two things from when I was in high school. So the first is I have this very vivid memory of one specific spring day, and my dad, who the rabbi and Shelley both know, is a guy, he's a retired coach and teacher and educator, and he's very intuitive about people and very intuitive about me. And I walked into the house one day, having come home from school, and I was in a terrible mood. And I don't know, it was high school, right? So I don't know if it was Mean Girls or a bad grade or a boy, I don't know what it was. But I walked in the door and my dad took one look at me and he said, "Take a walk and we'll talk when you get back." And I dropped my backpack on the red couch in the den and I walked out the door, and I walked for 2 miles. And it was really one of those perfect spring days. And I remember vividly when I walked back into the house, how my entire mood had shifted. And it was something that registered and stayed with me and that I held on to. And it was the first time in my life that I really recognized the power of movement. Not on my body, which of course there's that, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but even more importantly on my mood and my outlook. When I was in college, I was one of the many who gained not the freshman 15, but that was 35 pounds for me. Yep. And I'm about 5'2½", those of you guys who know me personally. So that was a lot. And in my junior year of college, I literally walked from one side of the University of Maryland campus to the other. And it did a couple of things. Not just was it the process that helped me get a handle on my physical body, but if you guys remember back to that time in your life, it's a really challenging time when you're trying to figure out what your future looks like. There's so much uncertainty that you're tossed into. You're sort of pushed out into the world. And at least for me, my freshman year of college, right, it was all new. There wasn't a lot of pressure on figuring out what you're going to do next. And all of a sudden, by my sophomore or junior year, I felt like I had a lot to figure out. And I figured those things out through the act of putting one foot in front of the other, literally. And the third story I'll tell about my personal relationship with walking was shortly after the birth of my son. So my son was born on a cold January night via emergency C-section at Southampton Hospital. And suffice to say that the recovery in the heart of January and February was not easy, and the transition to parenthood was not easy. And the same way I have that memory around that moment when I was in high school, I remember the first time that my husband Eric and I took the baby for a walk in the stroller. We were fortunate to wake up to one of those perfect winter days, those rare days in New York when the sun is actually shining and you can feel the warmth of the sun in February. We put the baby in the stroller and we walked around the neighborhood. And I remember thinking, maybe we can do this. Throughout my life, walking has been an anchor for me. The research shows that most of us sit in this country 9 hours a day. And I suspect that the number is higher than that now that we're spending so much more time at home. When I left New York City and moved out here full time, I stopped walking. We drive. It's crazy. When you live in the city, you're walking all the time. And I missed that so much. Sitting has been called, you guys have probably heard this, sitting has been called the new smoking. The reason that they call it that is because they've identified so many negative health consequences that are the result of just sitting too much. You guys, we were not meant to sit 9+ hours a day. We're not built to do that. We're not meant to do that. And our bodies don't like that. The unfortunate thing is, the more you sit, the less you feel like moving. Because the other thing about your body is it is built and designed to conserve as much energy as possible, right? So in light of that, you're not going to want to move. And you are, in fact, going to want to eat the chocolate cake, lots and lots of chocolate cake, because we are still biologically driven to consume as many calories as we can when they're available to us. So even though these things are not good for us, we are sort of fighting biology a little bit, which is why it's imperative that we find a way to be intentional and deliberate about the ways that we take care of ourselves. And the simplest way to get that going is through a simple walking practice. So why walking? I'm going to talk about the value of walking for your body, your mind, and your mood. So we'll start with the body. Now, everybody's heard that walking is good for you. I'm sure you've all heard that, but I don't know that we really appreciate how good. So let me share a little bit of research. Walking has been shown to reduce our risk of diabetes, dementia, high blood pressure, several types of cancer, and dementia. One study showed that walking is so good for us that a regular walking practice can add up to 7 years to your life. I mean, that's a lot of value from the simple act of lacing up your sneakers and walking out the door several times a week, which is something that most of us can do. And we can do it now. Walking has also been shown to be incredibly powerful for your mood. It's a wonderful tool to not only help combat depression, but help ward off depression. It reduces your stress, it reduces your cortisol levels, and it boosts your mood. Something that I often say is that walking is a fantastic antidote to a crappy day. Mm-hmm. And the last is the mental benefits of walking. There's a fascinating study out of Stanford University just a couple of years ago that walking can fuel your creativity, increase your creativity by 40%. Walking has been shown to literally increase the size of your brain. So there's another fascinating study. You guys can tell as I said, I'm obsessed with the power of walking. There's a study out of one of the universities in Canada that showed that a regular walking practice actually builds the volume of your hippocampus, which is one of the reasons they believe that walking helps to ward off dementia. Walking has also been shown to improve your decision-making and your executive function. So when you are feeling fuzzy, when you are feeling mentally weary, often you're not tired in the sense that what you need is a nap. You are intellectually and mentally tired, and what you need is a walk. So against that backdrop of how incredibly powerful walking can be for your mind, your mood, and your body, I wrote a book called Walk Your Way to Better. And what the book is 99 very short sections. Each section is a story or a piece of research or a thought starter or something that I think is important for people to start thinking about. Women primarily, not exclusively, but I do tend to have a female slant in a lot of the work I do because I've been working with women now, gosh, for the last 15 or 18 years. So my hope, and the book has been doing really well. So it was published in the end of January, early February, and really the response has been so far beyond what I had expected, which is really lovely. And my hope was, and my request to my readers, is that they read a section a day, every couple of days, and they go for a walk. and they take that thought starter with them on their walk and let their mind percolate and ruminate on whatever that section, that thought starter, that piece of research brings up for them. And really that's what people have been doing. So out of 99 sections, not every section is going to resonate with everybody, but the promise that I make to my readers is that there will be at least 24 sections that are meaningful to you. So I know a couple of the sections of the book were shared with people who had registered for this session tonight. So I hope some of you guys have had a chance to look at it. If not, I'm sure Shelley will share it, and I'm going to share one section, an excerpt from one section with you guys tonight, because I think it's maybe the most important thing, or one of the most important things that we all need to think about right now. But part of the motivation for the book, which I didn't exactly address, there's so much wisdom available right now to us. Pretty much anything you want to know, anything you want to learn about, is available to you, which is an extraordinary thing. And we can all go deep down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out anything you want to learn. But the truth is, if you want to figure something out and you sit down at your computer and you start Googling, chances are very good you're going down the rabbit hole. And you're going to go from one thing to another thing to another thing. And then you're going to stand up and walk away. And what we're doing is we are bouncing from one thought to another, and so rarely giving ourselves the chance to really process. So that is the goal of my book, is to not just give you things to think about, but also to help us rebuild the practice of thinking deeply, if that makes sense. So I talked a little bit about that. A couple of the chapters, the sections, why people are like bananas. I think that was shared with everybody. Beware the voices in your head. You control the input, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. And get comfortable being uncomfortable. Just to give you a sense of some of the things that I talk about. So what I thought I would read to you guys, and I'm fine at talking and I'm terrible at reading, which is like a weird thing. Like reading aloud is challenging for me, but I'm going to do it because I think this is so important right now. And the message of this section of my book, it's walk number 47, and it's you control the input. And especially these days, and especially as we're living through a global pandemic and rolling into election season, I think the message that you control the input has never been more important. So I'm going to read a little bit. Starts with a story. Mason is my son and Eric is my husband. When Mason was barely 2, Eric and I inadvertently saw 3 movies in a row in which a child died. It hadn't been something we chose to do deliberately. We hadn't researched the movies before we went to see them, and we just kind of took what we heard from friends or online. Oh yes, see Pay It Forward. It was excellent. And we avoided the spoiler alerts. Never again, we vowed. To this day, we will turn off any television program and avoid any movie where a child dies. During the last election cycle, we watched a whole lot of political coverage, and we watched it descend from, quote, here is this politician's stand on this important issue, to name-calling and bullying, and politicians and pundits treating one another in a way that we would not allow our children to behave on the playground. No more. Yes, I want to understand the facts and the implications of a politician's position on issues I care about, but I had to turn off the vitriol and name-calling. When social media was in its infancy, I would find myself getting pulled into all kinds of content. The chance to read a stranger's personal, unfiltered thoughts or peek into their lives was fascinating. But all too often, I let that turn into a 2-hour round of compare and despair. Now I use social media to keep in touch with the people I care about, and that is all. Well, that's pretty much all. And finally, there are friends and people in my life who thrive on negativity and gossip, who never miss an opportunity to put someone else down, criticize their husband, or complain about their children. Little by little, I have reduced the time I spend with them. In our multimedia, multi-platform, constantly connected world, a startling amount of news, stories, blog posts, videos, and social media ranting is available every day, all the time. While some of that input is positive, much of it is negative. And we control what we allow into our lives every day. We choose the television we watch, the news stories we read, and the people with whom we spend time. This is not about denial. Tragic things happen every day, and that's kind of the point. Sad things happen in the real world, and they must be felt, experienced, and dealt with. You do not need to add dramatized, fictionalized tragedies to your life. You do not need friends who feed you gossip and thrive on other people's misery. I'm not suggesting you tune out every piece of negative information and encase yourself in a bubble of false positivity. You need to be informed and educated. But there is a difference between being informed and educated and watching an endless loop of tragic television. So next time you find yourself getting sucked into this week's Dateline tragedy, just say no, because you control the input. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of the kinds of things I talk about, but I also think that it's an important lesson that we just keep reminding ourselves. We have to be educated, we have to be informed, but we do not have to go down that rabbit hole of misery. I don't know if anybody read the New York Times today.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is it just me, or like, wow, it just keeps getting worse? It was bad today. The Times was bad. Usually there's like little nuggets of positivity, but wow, I couldn't find them today. Maybe it was just my mood. But it's about finding the balance that works for you. So that's what I wanted to share today. Happy to open it up and have a conversation. That's my email. You can find me on social media if you're hanging out on social media at Joyce R. Shulman. The Weekly Walk podcast is a podcast that Eric and I do each week. And then I do weekly, what I call walk and talks, where I have the pleasure of walking and virtually and interviewing some really interesting people. So if that's of interest to you, my suggestion is always lace up your sneakers, walk out the door, and take the Weekly Walk podcast with you. Good company for a 30-minute walk. So, I'm right on the money. 30 minutes, and there we are.
All right. So we can put on gallery view if anybody has anything to share. I definitely have a couple comments, but I'll be kind and let other people go first, and then some questions and some thoughts. And if anybody has anything to say, just raise the hands, and I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay, Fran, go on in.
Yeah, I mean, this Joyce resonate with me a lot because I think my family, myself, I consider myself a walker. I'm a hiker. I've been fortunate enough to do many trips, but in this current environment, from March to the current, walking has been a savior. And walking with friends with masks at the appropriate distance, particularly in March and April when things were extremely stressful. I myself have experienced the endorphins, moving around, in different times as well. And I'm fortunate, someone who I'm not down that much, but we're human. And I've experienced, I'm going to go take a walk, and it's different. Just the one other element I'd like to, share, particularly I experience it probably the most when I'm on hiking trips, when I'm in beautiful places. I've, consider myself for my entire life, to be athletic in terms of sports. If I get any more sports equipment, I have to buy another house to have room for it. But hiking, I find hiking different, because hiking, walking, it's all you. Yes, a pair of sneakers, a pair of hiking boots, but it's all you. It's not any external equipment. I find, and it's hard to explain fully, but there is this sort of internal high that you get by exerting your own body, and also the ability to appreciate the environment around you. Anyway, so
I think there's also I have two thoughts around that. Well, I've one thought around that and something else entirely. But there's a certain freedom for me that comes from the power of walking and hiking in particular, because there's something about just knowing that you can get from here to there under your own steam.
Right.
That's, you know, I can't explain it, but you know that you can. I can walk to the village. I mean, I remember September 11th thinking like, all right, if I had to, like I could walk from New York. Like it would take me a really long time and it wouldn't feel good, but I could. So there's something empowering about that. On a personal note, Frances, you know, you and I have connected, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, right. And, you know, and it's interesting because when you say that you can walk in the city from here to there, I mean, I live in the city as well. And I remember at one point there was a subway strike, and I had professional obligations that I needed to take care of. And I think that day I probably walked at least 25 miles in the city to go to point A to take care of what I had to do. And it was quite satisfying, I can say. And just one other point, I walk a lot at, I live in Sag Harbor and I walk at Long Beach a lot. And you see people always there in ordinary circumstances who, you know, you would say are not particularly athletic, but you don't have to walk fast. I mean, medical science does demonstrate that any level of walking is certainly beneficial.
100%. 100%.
Great. I think I see Sue's hand, and I just also want to say that I know a couple people have signed on a little bit into the, don't worry, there's going to be a recording of this, which we can share afterwards so we can catch you up on everything that you might have missed. So now we're just kind of in the Q&A portion. So Sue, I think I saw a hand down by you, or at least in my windows, you're on the bottom.
Oxygen here. And I have to say, share that my most centered and my sanest days are the days in which I get out the door before I start anything else and take even a 20-minute walk. And it just changes everything. Everything.
It changes everything. And we've all experienced it. I think at least many of us have experienced it. And the reason that I keep preaching this message is the times that you need it most. This is really important, you guys. The times that you need it most are the times that you will feel like it the least.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I have to say, I walk. I'm not a big exercise person, so walking works for me. Walking slowly works for me. And the best gift I gave to myself is leaving my cell phone home. I just take my key to lock the door and I just walk, and I'm by myself without the cell phone. I detach, and it's worked. It's worked in the 3-4 months. Yeah. So it's when you said the social media, it's good to detach and not become part of that whole thing, and just smell the flowers and see how blue the sky is and whose car is out of needs to be inspected. You start noticing things you don't usually notice, but it makes me laugh. So it's okay. It's great. And it's great listening to you.
So I'm sorry I came in late.
Thank you for this. I've been online looking for Zooms to keep me company while we're going through this, and I found you, and this was wonderful, and thank you. And I will definitely look into getting your book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry I came in late, but it sounds very interesting. I walk every day. I'm very disciplined about it. So I either do just walking different areas that I walk on, or play golf, in which case I walk the golf course. I never ride. And so walking is great. The only issue I have with walking nowadays is I used to walk a lot in the woods,
Mhm.
but because of all the ticks out here, I find myself having to avoid going into the woods.
You know, I was once walking with a friend of mine. We were walking at Barcelona, which is a lovely walk, and you can do it. You can do it this time because the road is big enough, but there's been a lot of traffic there actually lately. But my friend Ken, who I think some of you guys know,
I know this
took
story.
us off the main road up into this like trails. He like chiggers. I got chiggers. Ticks are bad, but chiggers, man. Oh,
You don't want that. You don't want that.
you
But the
don't.
Barcelona neck walk, if you leave the road and you walk all the way around up on the bluffs and all that, it's quite spectacular.
It is
But
beautiful.
you can do it safely when it's below 32 degrees. No chiggers.
That does help.
Yeah.
That does help for sure. Well, I love to chime in for a second if I can, because so many things I would comment on, but one that struck me is particularly poignant. So I grew up in the city, as most of you know, and although you can look at me and know that physical movement is not necessarily number one on my list of things to do on a regular basis, walking has always been the one thing that just came so wonderfully naturally as a city person. I have no idea how to ride a bike. As I always say, I learned how to ride the subway. And so basically, no matter what I was doing as a kid, I was walking. And when I lived for a year in Los Angeles with Lou, when I was proving my seriousness in our relationship, and we had been doing long distance for a couple of years, and I swallowed the bitter pill as a New Yorker to go to LA. Either you go there because you were running away and you want to be there, or you're begrudgingly there and then you're curmudgeonly about everything, which is what I was. And, you know, the moment I saw people scooping out their bagels to put lettuce on top of it, I thought that was the enemy. But
Oh my God.
the thing that got me the most and the
That's
hardest
good.
part for me the entire year that I lived there was the fact that basically nobody walks anywhere, right? Even parking, for the most part, you valet the car. You don't even walk from where you park the car. And so I found myself actually the stubborn New Yorker that I am, and I took the bus most of the year, believe it or not. Like me as the only person in the entire city of Los Angeles that took the bus. And it meant walking all over the place there. And so actually over time, I grew to appreciate certain parts of LA that I probably otherwise would have never enjoyed because I would have just driven through them, right? Or I would have been on the bus and I would have paid no attention to it. But I forget who said it, but sometimes it's really the only time where you notice certain kinds of things. And even repetitive walks, like the dog walk that I experience pretty much every morning at the same basic time, there is something new going on. I see a different piece of wildlife, you know, whatever it is. When I was a kid, it was usually one kind of wildlife, and it was the kind that you avoid. But, you know, it really is one of these things where I think actually as a city goer, that I miss walking the streets from time to time, but I also appreciate the fact that where I get to walk on a regular basis is basically heaven. And so I think that there's a lot of what you say, Joyce, a lot of your teachings that intentionally or otherwise dovetail with a lot of what I found to be particularly meaningful about Judaism and sort of a Jewish approach to life. And as we were talking about before, that, you know, I think sometimes if you walk every day, as Howard said, right, that is a practice. That's not an accident. It's not a happenstance. It's something that you have devoted yourself to do and that has a beneficial aspect that continues to make you want to do it. And so obviously as a religious person, you know, my natural analog to that is prayer. But a lot of times we subdivide these things into separate entities. So the last piece I'll just say is, you know, one of our congregants told me that what he's been doing is he takes his cell phone, not, you know, a different reason why, and his headphones, and he goes for a walk when we have services on Saturday morning. And he basically turns it on
I
YouTube
love
and he listens to it and he walks as the service is
Good
going on.
idea.
I
And-
love that.
Exactly. And he told me flat out, he said, look, Rabbi, I love you. And I'm sure I'll come back every once in a while to see you. But just so you know, even after the pandemic is over, I think this might be my thing. And I said, that's
right.
wonderful. You know, like we will find other times to spend time together, but that's wonderful.
Well, I would listen to the Torah study
so,
while I
you
was
know,
walking. That would be very interesting.
There's
It's a very interesting thing, you know,
There
but
is. You guys, there's
you know.
so much research. I have two last thoughts on that. There's so much research that I alluded to and didn't dig into really deeply, but around how your brain processes information when you're walking. And that's powerful stuff. There's real value to that. And the other thing that I was thinking about, thinking about, Rabbi, something you said earlier, I think, I guess it was during Havdalah, but about rituals. And I was thinking about the rituals of Orthodox Jews
Mhm.
who walk to and from synagogue. I mean, take a
Right.
minute and think about
sure.
that, right? That's that time where you create this separation between the rest of your life and
Yep.
your spiritual practice.
Mhm.
You walk with your family.
Yep.
And then at the end, you take that time to really process, even if you're not doing it consciously, you're processing what you've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who's ever had the experience of being in Jerusalem, for example, on a Shabbat when most of the city really just shuts down, it becomes overnight almost an exclusively walking town. And I can remember as a kid how many times, in fact, exactly as you described, right? It may take 20 minutes to get back from synagogue, but it lends itself to all manner of discussion,
Yep.
oftentimes perhaps a critique of the
Mhm.
rabbi's teachings of that evening, or whatever it might be. And sure enough, that's exactly correct. Um, and as an aside, I would say that probably 90% of the things that I've given sermons on in my years here were probably started as an idea on a walk. I can say that almost definitively. So, you're right on the money with it, Joyce. Right on the money.
And oh my gosh, you guys, I'm sorry, I could go on forever. But the other piece that we didn't talk about at all, and partly because we're living in this COVID quarantine kind of situation, is the power of walking together.
Mm.
So I'm thinking right now about families and communities walking home from synagogue and that opportunity to talk and communicate and forge connections. Walking together. I did a TED Talk in December all around loneliness and walking and the power of walking together.
Mm.
So to those of you who said that you walk with your friends now safely as you can, walk with your loved ones, that's incredibly powerful too. Conversations had while walking tend to be really rich.
Great.
We had,
Shelley.
talking about rituals, I love to walk. It's very much part of my life, but a walk that really sticks with me is we had a death in the family.
Mm.
And the rabbi told us after the Shiva, I want you all to get up as a family and walk around the block, and you come back and life starts again.
Mhm.
And it was so meaningful. Yeah, it was really unbelievable. So,
Completing the circle of life.
right, yeah, it was really amazing. Very powerful.
Mhm.
So,
If rabbis are good for anything, I think sometimes it's that kind of ritual. But I've always loved that teaching is one of my absolute favorites. I think you're right on the money, Shelley. Really, and it very much supports Joyce's central thesis, right? That story that you told from your childhood, right? That Genesis moment for you, I feel like is such a key moment. I'm going to put that one in the back of my mind for the inevitable time in which Eva walks through the door eventually in the same way. And I can tell her the same thing I'll tell you. My teacher Joyce told me, this is what you need to do. Okay, put your shoes back on, get out the door, and come back. And I think that's great.
By the way, there's some great walks in LA that you could do.
No, there really are. I know. The
All over
irony, of
Santa
course, is that
Monica.
as I'm saying, I liked all this walking. Every time that Lou wanted to take me on a hike somewhere, I said no. I like city walking, street walking, that kind of stuff. But then
South
she gets angry with
Central.
me because I walk like a New Yorker, which usually means you're walking with a purpose. It's like I'm just trying to get from here to there, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
she's telling me to look up at the sky. The greatest rabbi for this conversation, really, there was really two of them. One is older than the other. Is the Baal Shem Tov, who's the rabbi that's generally credited with being the founder of Hasidic Judaism. But the other is more contemporary, is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who I've taught many times. But he's known mostly for his work on the prophets or his work as a civil rights activist or a peace activist. But his beginnings, actually, his concept of what's called radical amazement, right? One of his great quotes, which I've used before, is about just going into the park, basically, and looking at the trees. My dad told me that when he was, a student of his, that he would come back from a walk in Riverside Park and he'd say, "Oh my God, I saw the most beautiful tree," and he could talk about the experience of this walk in the most profound fashion. And of course, the jaded, cynical amongst us will say, "Boy, that's silliness." But the truth is, it's rather profound. right? Is
Mhm.
he found a way every single day to be amazed. And I think that what Joyce is saying is that if we get out into the world, if we get off of our phones, if we get away from the Michigas, at least for a little while, we will find amazement out there, even if it's fleeting.
Yep.
And I think that's a very, very powerful teaching for all of us, no matter what our religious observations may be, right? It's just a powerful core teaching, I think.
Uh-huh.
So how do you motivate yourself when you stop walking for a while? Which happened because of a physical thing, you know,
Uh-huh.
and then trying to get you back into it.
Good question.
I've always been, from, I don't know, 20, 25 years, I've gone to the gym a lot. But obviously in this pandemic, you can't go to the gym. And I was walking, but then you hurt yourself and you can't walk, and it's very frustrating. And then you get lazy.
Walking with someone, like it's like having an appointment at the gym with a trainer, that you have to be there for the appointment. Calling a friend and arranging
Yeah,
to walk.
I was doing that. You know.
Yeah, but
There's
didn't-
also, there's a little bit of sheer force of will. You kind of have to see it for what it is. And if you take anything away from our time together tonight, I hope you take away my voice in your head that says, when you need it most, you're going to feel like it least. So just stand up and walk out the door.
Yeah.
Because there's really no magic to it. Francis is right. If you're, if you can connect with somebody, if you can make an appointment with somebody to jump on the phone with them, walk in person. But if not, it's just sheer force of will.
Well, you could also set up a little reward for yourself. So one of the walks that I do is in Southampton on Little Plains Road, and I park a ways from at least a mile away from the ocean, and my reward is to get to the ocean and see the ocean.
I love it.
And then coming back, my reward is getting back to the car.
I mean, I have often walked for coffee.
Yeah.
We'll walk for coffee.
We'll walk for coffee.
We'll walk for coffee.
My husband had an injury and he had an operation, and what he did, and I sometimes do too when I don't feel like walking, he has his buoyancy belt, and we're lucky enough to have a pool, and I can walk 30 minutes in the pool, and I know it's different than walking, but I still am looking around. I'm not really talking to anyone. So, you know, when you are injured, maybe sometimes it's not as good, but at least it's an alternative that's probably less weight bearing, and it does a little good.
For sure.
It does a lot of good.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah,
diminish it. It does a lot of good.
Mm-hmm.
Or just walking out of the house, 25 steps going and 25 steps coming home. It'll
Yep.
take a total of a few minutes, and then you say, okay, I did 25 steps, and tomorrow I'll do 30. You know, just start small.
I have a friend of mine who used walking as a powerful tool as she was battling postpartum depression. And the deal she made with herself is, I will walk to the mailbox and back.
Right.
Every day I will walk
Right.
out the door.
Right.
And that was the start of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say mail a letter. And I have to laugh, Dan, because I remember the first time I was in Los Angeles with my family, and I grew up in the city, we couldn't believe that people got in the car to mail a letter.
I know.
I can't believe you're mailing a
Can't
letter.
find
instead of
mailboxes,
sending an
can't
email.
find garbage cans. It's just, there's an assumption no one will ever, I'm amazed that there are sidewalks. I truly am.
I'm stuck living in Jersey now, and they don't walk anywhere either. It's
No,
terrible.
no. The truth is actually you know, I'll add one other piece, which is many of you know, I think that Lou and I used to live where Rabbi Leon had been living, which was in walking distance of the synagogue. So for the first, I don't know, 3.5, 4 years, we had one car. Lou had the car for the most part. I knew I was going to be here pretty much all day long. So I walked to work, to and from, rain or shine, snow or otherwise, every high holidays, everything. And it was a big change when we finally eventually had to get a second car, and now that we live far enough away, and I miss it, and Lou misses it. It actually is one of the things we do miss about that ability to just kind of, if you need to walk to the jitney, you can walk to the jitney. right? It's one of those things. But certainly, and here, especially at night, you know, if you walk out the door and you're not prepared for it, it's a little terrifying, you know. It's really, I learned that very quickly. That, you know, the first time that I confronted wildlife that I couldn't see but I could hear, and I decided that I needed to be a little more careful about my choice of walking.
Every now and then the city kid comes out.
I know, it's like, you know, all the street smarts in the world mean nothing once we're out in nature. That's for sure. I rely on Lou for that. She was a brownie as a kid, so I think she still has some of that training, you know. Something or other. Like maybe Eva will save us all. But all right. So any last comments for our wonderful guest speaker, Joyce? And if not, we will certainly give her a wonderful round of applause. And I put in the chat just very quickly the website for 99 Walks, which of course you can find by Googling or otherwise. But Joyce, is there a preferred place to get the book? Do you have a personal
Amazon
or
Amazon?
Yeah, you know, place of choice. But I think this is really wonderful. And as I said, I recorded it. It'll just take a little bit of time to get it uploaded. Joyce, thanks so much for being willing to share it with those that maybe came a little bit later or others who might want to hear. But I think this has really been a very empowering, very wonderful way to end Shabbat, go into the rest of the week. And hopefully we'll all have a chance to learn a little bit and take Joyce's teaching out into the world. And perhaps we'll have a check-in about this somewhere down the road, and maybe we can even consider some kind of Temple Adas Israel walking experience of some sort that doesn't involve ticks or chiggers, and perhaps has some kind of coffee at the end of it to make it all worthwhile.
Sag Harbor is a great place to walk.
Beach walks are
True, but they'll think we're marching in protest of something. You know, if we all start walking up and down the street, especially this group of people, they'll just assume that we're upset about something. But,
I walk Long Beach very often, so if any of you guys spot me at Long Beach, please say hello.
All right.
You must have spotted me.
I walk Long Beach.
We all walk at Long Beach.
You all walk.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you again, Joyce. It was
Thank
wonderful.
you, Rabbi.
Really.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Joyce.
Now keep up the good
Thank
work.
you. Have a good night. Have a Shabbat Shalom.
They
Right.
said
Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
good night.